The thing about wrestling that I've always said is, like, not only is it the best base for MMA, because if a guy can dictate where the fight takes place, that is the most important aspect of fighting, and you can learn everything else. But it's like the mental toughness that wrestlers have.
This ends with wrestling swallowing the UFC whole and leaving strikers staring at the ceiling, wondering when the floor vanished beneath them. And if that sounds dramatic, good, because now we rewind violently to the moment. Joe Rogan casually said the quiet part out loud and exposed a crack so big in modern MMA that nobody wants to look directly at it.
That's true. And then as a wrestler, I can see it as even thinner because we do not have a single NCAA champion under contract. Now I'm using, in fact, here, let's back off of that. We don't have a single NCAA All-American under contract. Generally, we would have world team members and Olympians. We would have world medalists and Olympic medalists. Generally, we would have Olympic champions. We do not even have an All-American.
Joe Rogan didn't just praise wrestling, he detonated a truth bomb, because when he talks about dictating where a fight takes place, he's really talking about control over destiny. And nah, this can't be real, because if one skill decides geography, then every other skill becomes optional, and suddenly half the roster is standing on borrowed ground without realizing the lease just expired.
And the night Stipe retired is the night that the last heavyweight who participated in the NCAA tournament, the heavyweight class, was there. Now, at long last, Josh has arrived. So everything's going to be fine, but getting Josh his run, getting him his time, I think he can fast track it better than anybody. I just want to bring it to your attention that trying to guess what's going to happen at heavyweight is very hard to do.
Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because while fans still chant knockouts and spin kicks, the actual pipeline of elite wrestlers is drying up. And Chael Sonnen saying there isn't a single NCAA All-American active should make your stomach drop, because someone is lying to us about the talent pool, or the system quietly stopped recruiting the most dangerous minds in combat sports.
You gotta have everything, man.
There's gotta be a lot of tools.
Yeah.
A lot of tools.
A lot of tools and a lot of fortitude. The thing about wrestling that I've always said is, like, not only is it the best base for MMA, because if a guy can dictate where the fight takes place, that is the most important aspect of fighting, and you can learn everything else. But it's like the mental toughness that wrestlers have, the ability to grind out those practices, the conditioning that's involved in wrestling. It's above and beyond, I think, all other sports.
Think about that pause after Chael said it, because that silence wasn't accidental. It was dread, the kind that creeps in when you realize the UFC once had Olympians stacked like ammo, and now the cupboard is bare. And ask yourself, who benefits from that gap? Because history says someone always does, and they never announce it early.
I think it's a next level thing, and you see in UFC right now, the guys that are dominating and winning are kind of putting that wrestling base first, but making it MMA wrestling. You know, I feel like when a lot of D1 wrestlers come to MMA, they kind of don't make the switch of how to take the right shot and how to finish the right shot and how to use your feet to trip their feet out on the cage. And if you get stuck in a guillotine, how do you move from that spot? And I think you see the guys that are doing it best, the Islams, the Hamzats, are really going out there and attacking and making sure that people can understand that, hey, you gotta fear this, and then next I'm gonna come with the hands. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we're working on now, is that I've wrestled my whole life and I've done great things and won the Olympics and multiple national championships, but I think the main thing is going out there and understanding that you are that bad dude, but when you show them hands, now you have to respect both. And I think that's where a lot of this is going to come into play when I finally get to that point of reaching that competition.
When Stipe retired, something else retired with him. And most people missed it, because that was the last heavyweight with real collegiate wrestling experience walking out the door. And now we're pretending the division isn't floating on fumes while a new generation rushes in without the same anchors holding them steady.
Less of a problem certainly now than early in his career. Like if you see his first fight with in the UFC with Makhachev, he gets taken down in the first round. That's not going to happen now, and if it does, he gets up. You know, it's different. But it gets up against who? Does he get up against a guy like you? You know, it's a different. There's different levels, right? You really saw that with Jack Della Maddalena in Islam, right? There's levels, and when you got a guy that's at Islam's level, that's just a super elite grappler, unless you've faced that before, you don't know what to prepare yourself for.
I tell people all the time.
That's the thing with Petr Yan. He had been in there with Merab for the first fight, and so he knew what to expect. And he'd seen all those crazy fights. He saw the fight with Sandhagen.
Joe pivoting back to wrestling's mental grind wasn't nostalgia, it was warning. Because that conditioning he talks about isn't lungs or muscles, it's suffering tolerance. And fighters who can survive those rooms don't panic when plans fail. And here's teaser number 1. Panic is exactly what you're gonna see when these matchups stop going as scripted.
We're gonna get into the 2025 pound for pound awards. Henry, would you like to kind of start us off with the first award that will be handed out, Henry?
Yeah, of course, man. So, Male Fighter of the Year for 2025. Is it A, Merab Dvalishvili, B, Islam Makhachev, or C, Petr Yan?
Then Gable Steveson steps in and quietly rewrites the future, because he isn't talking about wrestling anymore. He's talking about evolution, MMA wrestling, blending shots, cage traps, hand threats, and suddenly the blueprint becomes terrifying. Because it's not just takedowns anymore, it's constant fear on every level at once.
Не знал, как будет состояние на 5 раундов, не знал я, как буду себя чувствовать вообще в бою, как будут мои силовые показатели соперника, как я буду чувствовать. Из-за этого бой чуть был таким скованным. Но я думаю, в последующем я уже знаю, что я на 5 раундов смогу с любым подраться, я буду чуть больше рисковать, чуть по-другому вести бой.
When names like Islam and Khamzat come up, that's not coincidence. That's evidence, because they didn't just bring wrestling, they weaponized uncertainty. And if you think opponents are losing because of strength, you're missing it. They're losing because they don't know what to defend next, and that hesitation kills careers fast.
What if he can outbox him? But it's hard when you got to worry about so many things. And I think Islam did a great job of showing the leg kicks, making Jack switch.
Oh, yeah.
Jack didn't really push forward, and Islam, when he did, shot the double, or he shot an outside single. And that's hard. It's hard when you got to think about so many things.
Islam Makhachev's early career struggles aren't a weakness anymore. They're proof of adaptation, because the guy who once got taken down now erases attempts like they never happened. And nah, don't blink there, because that jump in level didn't come from nowhere. It came from solving problems most fighters never even recognize.
That kind of speed is crazy. Like, that kind of speed and incorporated with elite wrestling is crazy. I'm like, what do you, the heavyweight division is so shallow right now. You got Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, John Jones if he chooses to fight again, Francis if by some miracle they can work something out and bring him back to the UFC. Other than that, there's no one compelling for like a championship caliber fighter. There's basically 4 or 5 guys on earth that are in this like championship caliber like class, and you're already there, which is nuts. And
Well,
you haven't
appreciate
even
it, man.
fought
Thank
in the UFC yet. When I watched you move and I watched you fight, I was like, okay, how do you stop that?
Levels is the word everyone throws around, but nobody respects until they feel it. And when Joe says, unless you've faced that kind of grappling, you can't prepare, that's not analysis, that's a sentence. Because preparation requires reference points, and Islam lives beyond most people's experience.
Islam, Usman, Umar. There is other guys too who win. There is we win 7 more fights. It was in September and October, and we last 2.5 months we win 10 professional fight, and now biggest fight in history on our team is coming. Islam gonna fight for the second belt. You know, this is what we call father's plan. You know, and I think I'm doing good. I'm doing not bad. Everybody winning, everybody on top, and it will be beautiful things when next week Islam will win welterweight title in Madison Square Garden Arena. It's biggest arena in the world, you know, and we're fighting for the second belt, you know. I can't wait and for this legacy fight, and I really believe Islam can make this history.
Now it flips into awards talk. And you think the danger passes, but it doesn't, because pound for pound debates aren't trophies, they're pressure cookers, and Islam being mentioned as fighter of the year quietly raises expectations so high that anything less than dominance starts looking like failure. Listen to how Islam breaks people down. Leg kicks forcing switches, shots timed not forced, layers stacked until opponents freeze. And that's where the paranoia starts, because this isn't flashy, it's systematic. And here's teaser number 2. Systems don't collapse overnight. They rot opponents slowly while the crowd cheers. Then Joe drags the heavyweight division into the light, and it gets worse because Shallow doesn't even begin to cover it. A handful of names holding up an entire weight class, and a young athlete already operating at championship speed before even debuting. Nah, this can't be sustainable without something breaking violently. Khabib calling the next fight part of his father's plan isn't poetry, it's pressure, because legacy talk changes behavior, and when he says biggest fight in history for their team, you should hear alarm bells, because moments framed like that rarely end quietly, and someone always pays the price. So here we are, wrestling rising, divisions thinning, champions evolving, and nobody admitting how close this whole ecosystem is to flipping upside down. And if you think this ends with a clean conclusion, you're not paying attention, because something is being set up behind the scenes, and when it snaps, it won't ask permission. I keep thinking about Joe Rogan's comment on control, because the more I replay it, the more it feels like a quiet truth bomb about MMA itself. He wasn't just talking about wrestling versus striking, he was talking about who decides the fight, who dictates pace, and who forces the other man to react instead of act. That kind of power doesn't come from flash, it comes from certainty. When Chael Sonnen brought up the decline of NCAA wrestlers entering MMA, it didn't sound like analysis. It sounded like a warning. Chael has always understood systems, and what he's really pointing at is a broken pipeline. Without that grind-heavy background, fighters may look sharp early, but they don't carry the same depth when things turn ugly. Islam Makhachev is the clearest example of where the sport is heading, and I don't think people fully appreciate how refined his dominance is. This isn't reckless pressure or brute force, it's calculated suffocation. Islam fights like someone who already knows the ending and is just calmly turning pages to get there. Khabib Nurmagomedov's presence still hangs over the sport, not as nostalgia but as a measuring stick. Every time Islam competes, it feels like that legacy is being tested and reinforced at the same time. Khabib didn't just leave behind highlights, he left behind a philosophy that still breaks elite fighters. The heavyweight division feels especially exposed in this conversation, because athleticism alone can only carry you so far. Joe Rogan calling it shallow wasn't disrespectful, it was honest. Without elite wrestling foundations, heavyweight becomes chaos heavy and substance light, and that eventually shows. Tom Aspinall is fascinating because he represents a possible bridge between eras. He has speed, power, and technical skill. But even with him, the wrestling question never fully disappears. That alone tells you how dominant grappling narratives still are at the highest level. What separates fighters like Islam and Khabib isn't just skill, it's emotional stability. They don't rush, they don't panic, and they don't chase moments. Watching opponents slowly realize that nothing they try is working is almost uncomfortable because the loss starts mentally long before it's physical. The pound-for-pound debate feels different now because consistency matters more than spectacle. Islam doesn't need viral moments, he just needs control across 5 rounds. That kind of dominance ages well and forces everyone else to rethink what greatness actually looks like. Henry Cejudo and Kamaru Usman giving Islam his respect wasn't hype, it was recognition. Champions know when a new standard is being set. When fighters at that level acknowledge someone, it's usually because they see something the audience hasn't fully caught up to yet. There's a dangerous illusion among young fighters that wrestling can be added later, like a bonus skill. Joe Rogan has hinted many times that this just isn't true. Wrestling changes how you think under pressure, not just how you move, and that mindset can't be rushed. The scariest part about wrestling dominance is how quiet it looks. There's no wild exchange, no desperation, just gradual erosion. Fighters lose options one by one, and by the time they realize it, the fight is already slipping away. When Joe talks about new heavyweight prospects who can wrestle and move, it feels like a preview of what's coming. Big men who don't gas, who don't panic, and who understand control are rare, but when they appear, they change divisions overnight. Fans will always love knockouts, but history keeps reminding us that dynasties are built on control. Georges Pierre understood it, Khabib mastered it, and Islam is perfecting it. The sport evolves, but that truth never really changes. What makes this shift unsettling is that it's happening slowly, almost politely. There's no announcement, no dramatic reset, just results piling up. By the time everyone agrees wrestling is king again, the damage will already be done. In the end, it feels like MMA is circling back to its core identity, stripped of illusions. When this era fully settles in, a lot of narratives will collapse, and many careers will stall. And just like always, the sport will act surprised, even though all the signs were there.